Well, when was the last time in church you heard Miley Cyrus and Marvin Gaye and Diana Ross in the same service? That's been a while, hasn't it? Well, you think about those words, though, and they fit very well if you consider, would this be what God might want to say to us? On the one of the groups from the church that went on the Passion Play trip to Oberammergau, Susan's brother, Steve Wilke, and his wife, Beth, traveled with us. And one day, Steve and I were walking. It was just the two of us, and kind of out of the blue, Steve said, you know, if I were in a desperate situation, like being on a stranded island, next to the Bible, the one thing I'd want to have with me is a hymnal. A hymnal. And I kind of thought about that and realized, yeah, that makes a good point. Because sometimes words aren't enough. You need a song that can lift you above your present discouragements. There's nothing like music, there's nothing like a song that can do that. The Reformation leader, Martin Luther, when he was in hiding for fear of his life, holed up in Wartburg Castle, living under an alias name, decided that in the midst of his discouragement to translate the New Testament and the book of Psalms into German. 400 years after that, a Lutheran pastor in Germany named Klaus Westermann was conscripted against his will to fight in the German army in World War II and was serving in the Russian front where he was captured, became a prisoner of war, was in prison. The only thing he was allowed to keep as a prisoner was Luther's translation of Psalms in the New Testament. He said one day the prisoners were standing in a circle to have a worship service, and they read from his book of Psalms, the 103rd Psalm. This is what Klaus Westermann says about that experience. We were standing with our heads bowed, stooped over. But afterward I thought, that's not the way to praise God. Such a psalm has to be spoken with joy, your head raised, your body erect. In that experience, I learned the difference between real praise and our notion of prayer. Then I began my dissertation, writing on a little board, sometimes trading bread for paper. It was then that I discovered that the Psalms of the Old Testament really come out of human experience. Klaus Westermann went on to become a great theologian, but he received his call and new hope for living, of all places, in a Russian prison, because ancient words by a psalmist invited him to look up. That's the focus of our study of Psalms this week. We're looking at different categories of Psalms. The 150 Psalms we have in the Old Testament are not in any kind of order, but there are different groupings of Psalms that share similarities. So 2 weeks ago, we heard a Psalm of Trust. Last week, we heard what is the largest category of Psalms, about a third of all of the Psalms, a Psalm of Lament. Today, we hear a psalm of praise. Psalm 121, where the writer says, I lift up my eyes to the hills, from whence does my help come? My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. This is also called one of the Psalms of Ascent. That includes the 15 Psalms from 120 to 134. Now, they get that name because they are believed to have been written for groups when they made a pilgrimage to Jerusalem for one of the holy festivals. As they were walking along, they would sing these psalms. Now, why the ascent part? Because they would have been going up to Jerusalem. If you see this map, it's probably hard to make out, but the dot right in the middle at the top is the city of Jerusalem. This is a topographical map of Israel, and Jerusalem is one of the highest elevated cities in the country, about 2,500 square feet. So from about any direction, you have to go up to Jerusalem. So groups would sing as they're going up to the city, and they're going to the temple for the holy festival. Imagine if you've been traveling for days and you get within sight of the holy city, and now you can see the temple. If you see that picture, this is not just a building you're looking at. The temple was believed to be the place that housed the divine presence. This is where the divine presence abides. When you see that sight, you're seeing God. What is the writer saying? I lift up my eyes. I see this, my help. This is where my help comes from. It comes from God. I'm looking up. It's kind of what the Holocaust survivor Corrie ten Boom meant when she said one time, if you look at the world around you, you'll get distressed. If you look within, you'll get depressed. But if you look to God, you'll be at rest. The psalmist is saying, look up. Look up from your discouragement to the one who's your helper. Look up from all your busyness to the one who really does bring life together for you. Look up from the distractions of the world around you to the one who says, peace, be still. It's as if the psalmist is saying that when you need things to look up in your life, try looking up. Now, there are a couple of things I want us to pay attention to about this psalm, and the first one is this. Notice the change in tense from the first two verses to the rest of the psalm. So you'll notice the first two verses are written with personal pronouns. Take a look at the verse again. The pronouns are underlined. So as I read this, I want you to say the pronouns with me. And it starts with, I lift up my eyes to the hills. From whence does my help come? My help comes from the Lord. 4 times, that strong personal affirmation. But then it changes. And for the rest of the psalm, it's in the third person. He will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. He who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. Why does it do that? Why does it go from first person to third person? Old Testament professor John Hayes speculates that this was not just a psalm to be sung while making the pilgrimage. It was written especially for the beginning of it, the start of the pilgrimage. He imagines that the people gathered to make their journey to Jerusalem, coming from different locations where they all agree to start at one central village. And so all of the people who are going arrive and they're ready to leave. But you know, any group like this really needs a strong organizer, planner type to make sure everything goes as it's supposed to go. Somebody who's like an Enneagram 8. Have we got any Enneagram 8s in the room? Is there an Enneagram? Okay, I see a couple. Oh, thank goodness for you Enneagram 8s. Okay. If it is not for you people, all of us would stand in the parking lot all day talking about what a great time we're going to have on the trip. You're the ones who actually get us there. So you can imagine this Enneagram 8 with a list and going, okay, have we got everybody? Is John from Nazareth here? Good, John's here. How about Mary from Cana? Okay, there's Mary. They go down the list. Everybody's there. They're ready to start. And imagine who's in the group. You probably have some young people who for the first time in their lives are going away from mom and dad and in the care of other people for a trip that's going to last many days. I'm sure there's some apprehension, some nervousness. Mom and dad have come to see them off. You probably have some very elderly people. I mean, all kinds of things could go wrong on a trip like this. They could fall. You've probably got their sons and daughters there trying once more, one final time, to talk them out of it. Please, Mom, please, Dad, you don't need to do this. Just stay home. And they say, enough, I'm going. You probably have somebody who's ill. And some friends have come, and they're kind of saying, are you sure? Are you sure you want to do this? And they're saying, yeah, I want to do this. So when they're ready to start, kind of like we might do when a group leaves from the church and they say, let's all meet in the church parking lot and let's start our trip. And the Enneagram 8 leader always does something right before you start. What do? Let's say a prayer before we start. Except this leader says, now let's sing. And everybody knows what that means. We're going to sing Psalm 121. And so the people going to Jerusalem start walking. And they begin to sing, I lift up my eyes to the hills. From whence does my help come? It comes from the Lord. And then as they keep walking, they hear behind them all of the people who have come to see them off, all of the members of the community. He will not let your foot be moved. He who watches over you will not slumber. He who watches over Israel never slumbers nor sleeps. And they keep singing the rest of the psalm. As you're getting out of distance from them, you hear them still singing. That's why there's a change in tense. So that the people going on the journey, making their own affirmation of faith, understand that this journey's not just theirs. There's a whole community praying for them, lifting them up, singing over them. Now, why has this psalm been of value all of these years? We don't take pilgrimages like that today. Because people understood from the earliest days that this psalm is not just written for people making a physical pilgrimage to Jerusalem. It's a reminder that no matter who you are, you're on a pilgrimage. Whether you own it or not, you're on a pilgrimage. Your life is a pilgrimage, and it is headed toward God. It is to be ultimately reunited with God one day. And sometimes in this pilgrimage of ours, our faith is not enough to get us through. And we need the faith of a community around us. I remember reading about a church one time that was wrestling with the question, do people need the church? They were experiencing decline. They had been reading the studies of people who say, we don't come to church because we don't need the church. We don't need it anymore. The church is not needed in our world. So they thought, let's bring everybody in the church together to wrestle with this question. So one evening, they all came together in a fellowship hall and sat at small tables, and they said, we want you to discuss at your table, do you think people need the church? And then after a while, they allowed anybody who wanted to stand and share if something important was said at their table. Well, as they were sharing, this one man finally stood up. He was kind of a pillar of the church. He was there every Sunday, and he shocked everyone when he said, I don't know that I do. He said, I'm here every Sunday, mostly because I've got a job to do. I make the coffee, I have to usher, I have to be here. Some Sundays when I come, I don't know that I believe that week. And when I hear the creeds spoken in church, when I hear people sing the songs of faith, I think, I don't believe that today. And out of integrity, I don't sing and I don't recite the creeds. But when I hear everybody else sing, and when I hear everybody else say the creeds, I realize that on those Sundays, I depend on their faith for my faith. That's why I need the church. Have you ever depended on the faith of other people to get you through? Maybe yours isn't so strong that week. Maybe you're not so certain, but when you get around other people who sing and who speak words of affirmation, it sort of becomes the thing that you need that gets you through. Last Sunday, we talked about a psalm of lament. And if you were here last week, you might remember that at the end of the service, I said sometimes the things that just rock us, we have no control over. The one thing we can control is to be stubborn. To say, God, I am not going to stop knocking on your door. You're just stubborn until you experience God. So after the service, I was standing out in the hallway talking to people, and there was a gentleman standing at the door some feet away from me, and I wasn't sure if he wanted to speak to me or not, so after I got finished talking with folks, I walked over to him. It turns out that he was very moved by the service. He shared that he's going through cancer. But he made a decision last Sunday morning in the room to be stubborn and to not give up on God. That Sunday afternoon, he wrote an email to me. Thank you, Pastor Rob, and once again, you and your wonderful congregation got me through another day and on my way to another week of living and serving. God knows why I'm suffering. You meet and serve so many deserving souls, and I'm grateful you took a moment, made eye contact, and saw another in need of prayer. After our prayer this morning, I went home and sat on the porch and started reading the book of Psalms in the beautiful sun. I connected with the internal struggles and cries of plea that's told in Psalm 1, verses 1 through 4. I had to lay it down, and with tears in my eyes, I began to pray. Dear God, so long have I turned my attention and intentions in a direction not meant for me. I made it about me and all about me. I believe I needed the attention of people. I needed to believe I was worthy and loved by all at all cost, when all I ever needed was you, our Lord and Savior. Selah. Now I will be stubborn and humble. I will not ever again waver from my belief in Christ, for it is he who sacrificed his life to make a righteous path through the unrighteousness of people. If I had not strayed and stayed on that path, I may not have lost so much of myself in my life. Selah. Lord, I'm not asking for a miracle. The cure my body needs requires more. I'm not asking for a quick fix to my ever so broken heart. Only time will determine how much of a scar will remain. I filled in the blank today that helped clarify my need. My need, Father, is to just know you're listening. Selah. Selah is a word used in 39 of the Psalms. It's like a rest symbol in music. That's how it's written. Just like musicians play music and they come to a rest symbol, they know that that's a moment for a pause. And what this man was saying is last Sunday, because of what was experienced in the community, it gave him a reason to look up, to go home and just pause and look up and remember, God, you're the one I need right now in this journey. Not answers to everything I'm going through, just to know I'm not alone in it. You're with me in my pilgrimage. So the second thing I want you to pay attention to is this understanding of keeping, because that's what the psalmist is talking about. Look up and know that God is keeping watch over you. The word keep appears 6 times in the 6 verses that are sung by the community. Listen again to some of them. The God who keeps you does not slumber. The God who keeps Israel never slumbers or sleeps. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord will keep you from all evil. The Lord will keep your life. And then my favorite of the verses, the last one. The Lord will keep your going out and coming in from this time forth and forevermore. That last verse I came to appreciate years ago when I was working on what became my first book on the I am sayings of Jesus. And the saying where Jesus declares, I am the good shepherd. I studied and learned more about the keeping of sheep. And wherever a shepherd kept sheep, whether in the open field or in a town or village, the shepherd needed a safe, secure enclosure, a sheep pen, a sheepfold, something with walls to protect the sheep, and there would be an opening. And the sheep go out and they come back in only through that opening. Now, why do sheep go out? They go out in the morning for pasture. And when you go out early in the morning and there's fresh dew on the grass, that's huge. Because in the dry, arid climate of Palestine, the sheep not only get the nourishment from the grass, they get water. There's joy, there's delight. They go out to find joy. But at night, they have to come back in for security. They have to have the security of the fold to protect them from predators. And when there's security, that's when the sheep can rest. They have peace. They go out for joy. They come in for peace. The shepherd leads you to joy and peace. He watches over your going out and your coming in. He keeps you. Too often in my life, I allow my joy and peace to get stolen. And really, the truer way to say that is, I too often allow my joy and peace to be given away. And I have to have something that reminds me of my true source of joy and peace. And I learned this in my 10th year of ministry when I hit a wall. And I didn't know if I wanted to do this anymore. It was my first senior pastor appointment. We had 3 small girls, and I was my 3rd year into this church that started out really well. Things were great, the people were wonderful, the church was growing. But after continued growth over a couple of years, friction started arising. The people who had been there a long time started feeling displaced. They started feeling out of control. And over all kinds of different issues, just conflict was arising. And as sometimes happens in a church, the conflict ends up coming toward the pastor. And I really didn't know how to deal with that. And it was wearing me out. And I remember it was a Father's Day, and we had a board meeting. And it's just one of those meetings where just everything falls apart. I had 3 small girls waiting for Daddy to get home for Father's Day. And when I got home, there was just nothing in me that could celebrate. To make matters worse, we were without a choir director at the time, a music director. And I had been asking a woman in our community to consider the job. She had studied at the Juilliard School of Music in New York City and would have been ideal for the position, but she kept turning me down. Well, Susan and I were getting ready to take a vacation to Colorado, just the 2 of us. Her parents were going to keep the kids. And right before we were to leave on vacation, I got a letter from this candidate. I thought, finally, there's something good going on in the picture. And I opened the letter, and she wrote me a 3-page letter to turn me down for the job because she had been hearing all over the community how there was conflict in our church. I remember standing in the kitchen with Susan. I threw the letter on the ground, and I said, the last dadgum thing I need is to hear from somebody who's not in my church that we've got conflict in the church. Susan said, I know that we are to go on this trip together, but I'm not going with you. You're going to go by yourself. And after a week, I might come and join you. I thought, great. Now Susan's not even hanging in there with me. The family dog would not even sit beside me to get patted on the head. And this was the final deal. The morning I left on the trip, Susan drove me to the Asheville airport at 5:30 in the morning for a 7 o'clock flight. I'm there plenty ahead. I'm standing in line to get my bag checked, and I wait an hour in Asheville, North Carolina. I finally get to the counter. It's my turn, and the gate agent says, we're not checking any more bags. They will not make it on the flight. I said, you can't do that. I'm flying into Albuquerque. I have a 4-hour drive to get to Colorado. I've got to have my bag with me. I'm sorry, we're not checking anymore. I said, well, what am I going to do? She got on the computer screen. She said, well, your bag will go out on another flight. It should arrive 5 hours after you do. I got on the plane. I pulled out a legal pad, took out my pen, and began crafting a letter to the president of U.S. Airlines. I worked through all of my issues. I mean, it was so cathartic. 3 hours of letting this, what kind of airline are you running anyway? Just right. I get to Albuquerque, get a rental car, go eat lunch somewhere, come back to the airport, walk around the airport about 100 times until my bag gets there. I put the bag in the car. I get in the car, start heading out of Albuquerque, trying to get there as fast as I can. And as I get close to like Santa Fe, when I'm away from the traffic, I just think, what am I in a hurry for? I mean, I'm not going to a meeting. I'm not late for anything. Nobody's going to be there. Why am I in a hurry? And I got around Santa Fe, and I was headed toward the San Juan Mountains at the Colorado border. And I was driving on like this stereotypical Western scene where you see the road that goes for miles in the distance and then up to the mountains. And as I got closer to the mountains, I saw an eagle circling the top rock formations of one of the mountains. It wasn't even flapping a wing, just wing outstretched, soaring around and around. And I pulled the car off the road, and I turned off the engine. And I got up on the hood of the car and laid my back against the windshield, just staring at this sight. And as I'm watching, something happened to me in that moment that has never happened to me again in my life. God put a song inside of me. The words of the 121st Psalm came to me, but they came in the form of this melody. And I just started singing these words. And I didn't want to lose it. So I got back in the car and pulled out that legal pad. I flipped over the letter to the president of US Air. And I started trying to draw the music so I wouldn't lose the melody. And I wrote this out. And I sang it a few times, looking up at the eagle, and got in the car and drove on. It was just the right time of day. The evening sun was hitting the rock mountains. They were glowing. I could clearly see this eagle. And that's the story. I got to the place where I was staying, had a good several days. Susan did come out and join me. We had a great vacation. I got home, and there was a stack of mail on my desk, and at the very top was a phone message from the person I had been asking to take the job, who wrote me the 3-page letter giving me the final no, don't bother me again. I called her. She said, I need to share something with you. About 10 days ago, I woke up in the morning. I sat straight up in bed. My husband said, what's wrong? I said, I don't know. I feel like God just told me not to close the door on that job at that church. We got together, we talked. She ended up taking the position, and the next 10 years at that church, amazing things happened. Now, I don't tell you that because of what God did in the church. That's really not the important part. It's because of what God did in me. I was a different person after that day, not a perfect person. But I was a different person after that day, carrying the weight of the world on my back, taking all of the things that people would say, making it my responsibility to figure out and to keep other people happy. And I just realized I have a keeper. I have a keeper. I'm okay. When I went on that trip, I did not know if I would come home a pastor or not. I was that low. I was ready to call it quits. But I kind of came home with a deal with God. Not that I would stay in it forever, but that I'll stay in it as long as you remind me when I need to remember that you're with me, that I'm not alone. It's a really simple thing. Look up. I realized when I got to my room that evening that had my bag arrived with me, I would have not had that experience. Had everything gone on schedule like I wanted, I would have missed out on something I needed that changed my life. And sometimes the things that feel like they are robbing us from the life we want can be God's way of getting us to the life we need, to just remember we have a keeper. So I sat down with Emery and with our choir director, Jeff Rogers, a number of weeks ago, and I tried to show them the notes of my song. And Emery said, he pulls his phone out, he said, dude, just sing it. So he recorded me attempting to sing this. And then thankfully, he and Jeff put it to proper music. And so the team is going to share this song. I hope it's something that you might find enriching, and then we'll go into our closing song from there. So are the people going to sing the refrain with you? All right, so I invite you just to stand. And they'll lead us in singing the refrain, and then they'll sing the main verses. We'll sing the refrain and allow our closing to remind us of the importance of a song that communicates truths of God's presence in ways words don't touch.